All right, what's going on? So today I want to talk about Burp Suite. Now, let me just start by saying this is one of those things, I think anyway, that seems complicated, but once you get it, you kind of be like, "Oh, that was really simple and obvious." So I'm gonna try to explain it many ways. Hopefully, at least some of those explanations will stick. But the main point to make is you're gonna learn by actually doing. So take information from this video, other articles, whatever, but go out and actually try it. And that's how you're going to learn the most about this. Now, let's proceed with talking about Burp Suite. What is Burp Suite? Burp Suite is a web proxy. Now, that's just kind of a fancy word for saying, and we're going to use a lot of fancy words. You'll realize they're pretty simple. But just a fancy way of saying a web proxy is something that sits between the client and the server. Now, what is the client? What is the server? When, I'm assuming all of you have gone on websites before. When you go on a website, right? Like I'm on Yelp.com right now, and you click on something. Like I'm searching in Vancouver, BC. Let's say beaches. Okay, so what did I do? I clicked on the search button and I made a search on Yelp.com. I did that on the client side. So I did that from my machine, from my computer. I was navigating to this, I was clicking search, yada, yada, yada. And then my experience of the website completely changed. So now I have all this information regarding Vancouver, BC. If I put in a different location, I say, I don't know, California, it would give me information for California. Okay. What's happening here is the client, in this case, our device, the one we're using to use Yelp, and Yelp server are having a conversation. Okay. And that conversation, put in kind of regular terms, is, hey, I want to know. So I say on the client side to Yelp server, hey, I want to know beaches near Vancouver, BC. And it returns all this information about, well, beaches near Vancouver, BC, obviously. So hopefully that's at least making some level of sense. Okay, so when this is happening, when we go on websites, when we interact with websites, we have more or less, our device has conversations with the company's server. Okay, and that conversation is what creates our experience. Okay, and that consists primarily of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, though maybe that's overcomplicating it for now, so let's table that. Just the main point, the main takeaway point here to understand: when you go on a website, you are the client, or rather the device you're using, we can say is the client, or your web browser, we could even say is the client. And but again, keep it simple. Let's not even overcomplicate it with browsers, whatever. Just you are the client as you're interacting with the website, and you're communicating with the company's server. Who is the company? Well, of course, it depends on which website you're on. So if you're on Google, you're talking to Google servers. If you're on Yelp, in this case, we are talking to Yelp's server. Okay, so hopefully that makes clear that in this diagram, what is the client and what is the server. Okay, I'll even change this to client to make it clear. So anytime we're on a website, we are the client and we are having a conversation with the company's server. And Burp Suite sits in the middle of that conversation. So it allows us to see what our device is saying to the server, and it allows us to see what the server is saying back. Okay, and hopefully that's making sense, and hopefully it'll make even more sense when we actually get to Burp Suite. So I have Burp Suite open here. Now, one thing, I am not going to show you how to set up the actual proxying of Burp Suite. This is something I could trivially show you. It's very easy to do, but there's 1,000,001 tutorials out there on how to do this. I'm not doing this out of laziness, though it is easier for me to not show you that shit. But I swear to God, I'm not doing this out of laziness. I'm doing this to try to teach you a lesson. And that lesson is that throughout Bug Bounty, if you were looking for, even in this course, I've said it many times, if you were looking for hand holding and step by step all the way, it's just not going to be a good time for you. As we go deeper and deeper into the course, you'll realize one of the most important things in this whole game, which I hope to drill into your head, is self-learning. Okay, and setting up Burp Suite, like there's 1,000,001 tutorials, might even be more than that, on Google, on Bing, if you use fucking Bing. But there's a lot. So it's very easy to set up, and I expect you, if you're gonna follow along with this course, if you're gonna actually find bugs in production applications, I expect you to be able to do that regardless of the skill level you're at, because there's literally step-by-step tutorials out there on how to do this. Okay, so I'm gonna go over it now. Again, I'm not going over the setup. By the setup, I just mean getting Burp Suite set up, so you can actually see the requests, and you'll see what I mean. It'll all make sense in a second. So let me clear this history. And remember how I was saying, hey, if you're on Yelp, whatever, your client and the server are having a communication. Let me show you that. So you see over here, I'm looking at beaches. Let's look at Kitsilano Beach Park. Okay, this is a particular beach. And now what do we have here? We're able to see that conversation. Now, your proxy history may not look like this. You notice how mine only has like Yelp stuff and no other stuff. Yours might have a bunch of other stuff showing up with it. What you want to do is you want to go to target, you want to go to scope, you want to add scope, and add your target here. Okay, that's all I've done. So if you see here, if I go edit, all I've done. And what that does is it puts Yelp in your scope. And then if you go here, you filter, you click on show only in scope items, it filters out a lot of the noise, which is really nice. Okay. So now when we clicked on something on the client side, in this case, Kitsilano Beach, we see all these requests coming in when we do that. Okay. And all these requests are sent from the client side, from our machine, from our device, laptop, mobile, whatever it is, to the Yelp's server. Okay. And the Yelp server also responds. And again, that's what creates this experience of the website that we have in front of us. That's what gets us all these cute photos and stuff. Okay. So I'll actually, even to take it one step further, I'll demonstrate this as well. Okay, so you see how it says Kitsilano Beach Park. I bet you will be able to find it, this information, in one of these GraphQL responses. Look at that. So again, our client, our machine, sent out this request to the Yelp server, and Yelp server responded with the information. Again, Kitsilano Beach Park, it says right there, the information that we see on our client side. So again, this is stuff that's all hidden from you as a user, and Burp is allowing you to take a look into that world, and we'll see why that's important and very useful in a second. But hopefully this drives the point home very clearly. Our device sent, so when we clicked on, hey, I want to see these beaches in this location, our device sent this request to Yelp server, among many others. We see there's a lot of requests here, and it returned the information required to create the user experience that we see. Okay. Hopefully that's making some level of sense. But again, at a very high level, all you need to understand is when you're visiting websites, you are the client and you are talking to the company's server. Okay. And then the server, of course, is talking back, and that's creating the experience. And Burp Suite is a web proxy that sits in the middle of that conversation and allows you to see that conversation. All that stuff, again, when we're just regularly on our phone or just clicking around on a website, we don't get to see any of that. But Burp Suite allows us to see it. Okay. Now, in Burp Suite, the main things you are going to be, so the scope I explained already, this is going to reduce a lot of noise for you. Okay, this will also make it so when you're intercepting, you see how it says logging out of scope proxy traffic is disabled. So this will also make it so when you're intercepting here, so I can turn intercept on, and I'll explain what intercept is as well. But it makes it so in this intercept tab, only Yelp requests will show as well, and no other requests will show. Now let me maybe demonstrate that. So we see here, intercept. Now, the main things you actually have to be like super familiar with, and I'm going to try to explain all of them as best as I can, but again, use it, actually apply it, and that's how you learn the most. But the main things in Burp you absolutely have to be familiar with and proficient with. One is intercept, and the other is repeater. These alone, like HTTP history is pretty nice as well, but to be honest, I don't use it that much. And the search function is really nice as well. So we'll touch on some good additions, but you absolutely had, like, this is not optional. This is the main point I'm trying to explain. Getting proficient and understanding Burp Suite is not optional. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's not optional. And being familiar with intercept, being familiar with repeater, again, as far as I'm concerned, not optional. Okay, so that's the point I'm really trying to drive home here. So I'm going to try to explain it best as I can, but you have to practice. You should know all the stuff I'm explaining to you right now. You should know, like, back of your hand, front of your hand, whatever the saying is. But, like, you have to know this stuff. And I was just as clueless as you when I started. So I'm not trying to intimidate you, not trying to overwhelm you. Take it day by day. Relax. It's not that serious. But you have to understand this stuff. Again, not optional. So intercept does exactly what it sounds like. It actually intercepts the request. So you remember how I said that Burp sits in the middle of the client and the server. Okay. Now what that allows Burp to do is when we're creating this request, I wonder if I can get a text box. So we created our request. In this case, what request did we make? We clicked on the takeout section. So when we created that request, but we turned intercept on, you saw that we turned intercept on before, but let me maybe even drive this point home even more. What happens when I turn intercept off? It actually loads, right? But what was happening? Let's do it again. Intercept on. Click takeout. Or let me click delivery this time. What's going on? Absolutely fucking nothing. It can't load. But we're seeing a bunch of stuff pile up here. What does that mean? That means that we at the client side are sending a request like, hey, request takeout. Okay. But this is not making it to the server. It's at the proxy level, in this case Burp, and we've told Burp, hey, any request that you receive regarding Yelp.com, intercept it. So what it's done is just holding on to this request until we decide what we want to do with it. Okay. So hopefully that is making some sense. And what's going to happen when we turn intercept off? This request is going to go from here to here, and it'll actually go to the server. And then, of course, the server is going to respond. Okay? But the main point to understand with intercept is intercepting requests, not responses. There are ways to intercept responses, and we'll talk about that. But what I mean by that is, remember, we had intercept on our request to, hey, I want the takeout information was over here. But when the server actually responds, so when the server, so server receives this request for takeout information, responds with takeout info. So when this is coming back, remember I said the client server having a two-way communication. So when this is actually coming back to the client, that is not being intercepted. Okay, so when you have intercept on, you're only intercepting requests. So the stuff that your device, your laptop, your mobile, whatever, is sending. So hopefully that is making sense. But when the server actually responds to that request, that is not being intercepted. And that is all that intercept is. Okay, it's really that simple. Now, again, hopefully that made sense. I'm thinking about whether or not to touch more on intercept, but I feel like that makes sense. But again, to summarize it, the main point to understand, the client and the server are having a two-way communication. Burp Suite sits in the middle of that communication, allowing us to actually see it and also manipulate it, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And all intercept is doing is allowing us to hold those requests that are being sent from our client to the server. Now, why would you ever want to hold a request? The main reason, at least for us, is so we can manipulate it. Okay, so we can manipulate it. Now, what I'm expecting right now with some of the stuff I'll say is some basic, just very, very basic understanding of some web security concepts. Okay, and if you don't have that, we're touching on bug classes afterwards, because you kind of need to know Burp Suite to start to understand bug classes, I feel. Right? Because you're going to be manipulating the request and response that gets you. Anyway, doesn't matter. I don't want. That's another tangent. I don't want to go down that. Maybe it'll overcomplicate. So let's keep it simple. I think Burp Suite needs to come before you start understanding the bugs. But now the manipulation, the main reason we would want to manipulate is to find the bugs. Okay. So again, some of this stuff, if you don't know anything about web security, like IDORs, and I'll just do IDORs. They're the simplest ones. So if you don't understand these things, the next part might be a little confusing, but again, once you get hands-on with it, it will make sense. Okay, so just try to follow along as best that you can. But the main reason that we would want to manipulate requests is to actually find the bugs. What you have happening right now, okay, when we're clicking around on Yelp and we see this conversation happening between the client and the server, this is exactly how the company, in this case Yelp, wants you to use their software. Okay, they've literally created it in this way. So they want that when you click on takeout, you get takeout information. Apparently not in this case, but they want that when I click on About Me. So what's happening on About Me? I'm, on the page of my information. Okay, well, what happens when I click on notifications? These are my notifications. This is what Yelp wants. Yelp doesn't want that I click on these notifications and I see, for example, your notification. Right? That would be a user privacy issue. So main point to drive home here is when you're just using the web application like normal. Yes, Burp Suite is allowing you to look into that conversation, and that's interesting in and of itself. And sometimes that can lead to bugs, if you find like some password or API key in that conversation somewhere. Okay, which rarely happens here. It's not going to happen on the main app. So actually, it might happen. It may not, but it won't be common. But with that said, this is how Yelp wants you to use their software. Okay, so naturally, Yelp is already Yelp hires security people, and Yelp has already security tested their application. Okay, so if you're, using it like normal, that's not how you'll be able to find issues. The whole point of this bug bounty stuff is to find security issues, to find security bugs. And you're not likely to find a bug by using the website exactly how they want you to use the fucking website, right? That just doesn't make sense. So when we're trying to find bugs, we're trying to find ways to use the website in which the company does not want us to use it, right? I want to find ways to, when I click on notifications, to see your notifications instead of mine. Because now that's a security issue. We can report that. We can get paid, right? So hopefully that's making sense. But again, main point to understand, when you're just clicking around on the application like normal, you're using the website exactly how the company wants you to use the website. And the whole point of bug bounty is to find edge cases, to find ways the company doesn't want you to use the website. And that way we can find a security issue and we can report it. Okay, hopefully that is making sense. Now, going back to the intercept and now particularly the repeater. What is something? So say I'm on Yelp, and we're gonna now go into API calls. I explain API call more in the next section of this course. So again, just if some of it doesn't make sense, don't trip too much. All right. Right now, I want the focus to just be Burp Suite, and by the end of this video, I'll summarize everything one more time as to the main takeaway points that I need you to understand. Okay, so if you don't understand APIs and stuff too much right now, don't trip. But what we're going to do here is we're going to turn intercept on, and what we're going to do, we're going to edit our first name. So I got that. Let's save. Okay, what happened? Well, there seems to be a call being made here. And what we're going to do, we're going to right click on it and send it to repeater. And for now, I'm going to drop this request. Now, this is maybe an important point to touch on with intercept. What is this forward? What is this drop? If I press forward here, so right now, I'm making a request to the server to say request to edit first name. Right? You guys saw that over here, and you see how it's still currently in a loading state. Nothing is happening. But request to update the first name. And it is currently being held, right? So we turn intercept on. If I press forward, it will actually go to the server. Okay, that's simple enough. We're saying to the proxy, hey, you're holding on to this request, forward it to the server. If I press drop, it will drop the request. That's simple enough as well. We're basically saying, hey, you're holding on to it, just delete it. I'm not interested in it anymore. Okay. So that's all forward and drop is. So what have I done right now? I've taken this request, I've sent it to repeater, and now I'm going to drop it. So I'm saying to it, hey, forget about this request. You don't need to send it forward for now. And now we'll go to repeater. Now, what do we see here? We see a bunch of text and stuff, but we see here first name. You see N-O-O. Hopefully the text is big enough. But we see first name N-O-O. Okay, we did that over here. Well, now I've dropped the request. Let me go back to it. We updated that, and then we clicked save. Right, and that sent this request forward. Now, this is the type of thing, or the type of situation in which we can start to look for bugs. So you think, okay, there's this stuff here. How can I mess around with this? Let's take the first name example. Let's say Yelp has a CEO. His name is Jeremy Stoppelman. Let's say that Yelp doesn't want anyone to be able to impersonate the CEO on the website. So they don't let people make their first name Jeremy Stoppelman, for example. So what can I do here? I can see here, okay, this request is for the first name. Let me try changing it to Jeremy, because what'll happen sometimes is when you try to just put it in over here on the client side, it'll say, oh no, you can't do it. But if you try to do it directly through the proxy, so this way that we did, we're sending it to repeater, and then you modify the attribute. So it wouldn't let me do it on this side, for example, but I take the request, I send it to repeater, I do it over here. Sometimes this will work. Okay, and that's a type of bug related to client-side validation. Let's not overcomplicate it. We'll talk about that later. But the main point to make here is Burp allowed us to see the conversation. We intercepted it. We sent it to repeater. What is repeater allowing us to do? It is allowing us to repeat that request. So we've taken that request that was updating the first name. And now, again, we're going to assume Yelp doesn't allow you to set the name as CEO, so you cannot impersonate the CEO. Okay, just for this example, let's assume that. So now what we've done is we've taken that request, we've sent it to repeater, and we've changed the first name to Jeremy. We'll change the last name to Stoppelman. Okay. And then I'll send it forward. What happens when I send it forward? The request is going to the server, and we can see here response, and the server responds. And in this case, it's asking if I'm sure. Maybe it recognized that the name is obviously fake, so it's trying to get me to confirm. But point to make again, what were we just able to do? We were able to get the request, intercept it, send it to repeater, where we were able to repeat that request. And the main reason you'd want to repeat requests is so you can manipulate stuff in the request to try to get the server to do something it shouldn't. Okay, again, we gave the example of the CEO name. Let's assume the server should not be able to allow you to change your name to Jeremy Stoppelman. What will happen in some cases is the protection would only be applied on the client side. So on the client side, there will be the proper code to say, hey, you can't do it, but we manipulate the requests at the proxy level. So, we send it to repeater and we manipulate it there. And then we send it forward, and then it works. That's something it's missing server-side validation. Again, that's maybe overcomplicating it. Let's table it. But the main point to make is we wouldn't have been able to set our name as Jeremy Stoppelman unless and until we sent the request through Burp. And sending it to repeater allows us to take that request and manipulate it so we can play around with it. Let's assume maybe we tried it the first time, we tried Jeremy, but it didn't work. Now we can play around with this more. Maybe we add another parameter here. Okay, and then we try making the first name something else and then following it up with another first name parameter, Jeremy. That's not so much the point. But the main point is we can now manipulate this and play around with it, resend it. So, okay, let's say this is something we wanted to try to see if it will work, and then we'll send it again. Okay, and then we get a response again. Okay, so main point to make, when we send it to repeater, it allows us to repeat and manipulate the request as much as we would like. And that allows us to actually, again, play around with it to hopefully get the server to do something it should not be able to do. Okay, so hopefully that is making some level of sense somewhere. I don't want to get into the bug types since we're going to do that in later videos. Okay, so to summarize all of that, the main thing that I need you to take away from this: 1, go set up Burp. 2, actually play around with it. This stuff, again, doesn't make sense until you get hands on with it. Okay, so play around with it. Portswigger Academy, they have free courses and stuff. Play around with it a little bit. I'm not saying learn everything there is to learn about Burp, but just play around with it. At least understand the points that I've tried to make in this video. Okay, go to target, go to scope, set. You can use Yelp if you want, but ideally, honestly, use a different target that's going to actually start to build up that muscle memory. Because if you're just following step by step what I'm doing, it's not really building up that muscle memory. Okay, so regardless of how intimidating it is, how scary it is, go target scope, set your target, and then turn intercept on, see that conversation between the client and the server, send a request to repeater, play around with it, etc., etc. But to summarize this lesson, Burp is a web proxy that sits between the client, your mobile device, laptop, whatever, and the company's server. And it just allows us to see the two-way communication that is taking place between those two. Okay, and why would we want to see this communication? So we can find the points in which we can manipulate it to try to get the server to do something it should not be doing. Okay. That's honestly the only thing you need to understand. I'm going to say it one more time. Okay. Like I'm really trying to just drive the bare bones home as much as possible. Understand the bare bones and then go play around with it. It will make sense. But again, Burp is a web proxy, sits between our device and the company's server. It allows us to see the communication that's taking place. Normally when we're do I have intercept on? No. So normally when we're, over here, we're clicking on notifications, whatever, we don't see anything. It's almost like magic to us, right? It just works. But Burp allows us to actually see what's going on. But when you're using a website, just as you normally should, you're using it literally exactly how the company wants you to use it. And we want to do the exact opposite. We want to be able to do things the company doesn't want us to do. So Burp allows us to see that conversation. That's great. That's just a regular workflow. But it also allows us to manipulate that conversation. Okay, let me give one really simple example to hopefully drive this point home even more. Let's say there's a conversation happening here between just two regular human beings. Okay, and let's say we have a similar situation where there's a middleman. Okay, where there's a middleman. So again, this is just two human beings communicating, and there's a middleman. And this guy, the client, says to the proxy, again, the proxy is the middleman. So the client talks to the proxy sends a message to, fuck it, we're going to change their names. John, Adam, James. Okay. So John sends a message to Adam saying, yo, tell James I will sell one apple for $1. Okay, let's assume this. And this request goes to Adam. So again, John and James, they communicate strictly through Adam. And the regular workflow, how the company wants you to use the website, is Adam would just forward that message to James saying, hey, John is selling apples for $1. But what you do, again, when you're able to manipulate these requests, what you're doing is you're actually saying, hey, let's tell James that John is selling apples for $2. Now, why would you want to do that? Of course, then James gives you $2, you pocket $1, and you give $1 to John. That's $1 of pure profit for you. Okay. So you manipulate the request. You tell James, hey, John said he's selling one apple for $2. Okay. So James like, cool, I fucking love apples. Gives $2. Sends that response back. Okay, from here we steal $1. We give $1 to John. Everyone's happy. No, I'm just kidding. But that's the point to make. Why, when we're trying to be, when we're trying to again make the website do things it shouldn't, we would never just send the message forward of $1. That's the regular workflow. And all Burp Suite is allowing us to do is sit between that and manipulate it to our benefit. Okay. And that's ultimately what a security bug is. It's some sort of misconfiguration that an attacker is able to use for their benefit. Okay. So, hopefully, again, some of that made sense somewhere. Get hands-on with it. It'll make more sense that way. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.